Hello friends, for today's video we are looking at episodes 6 through 10 of Avatar: The Last Airbender's third season. This happened in a previous batch episodes reaction and review that I did, where there is one of the episodes having what feels like a two-parter. Maybe originally it was a to be continued and it picked up or something like that. And that would be the Day of the Black Sun, which is actually the one that we're ending on. So I'm a little bummed that we're having to end there, because this is leading up to something really, I'm assuming, monumental. We've been building this moment up since the library of season 2. So I am sad to have to end in the middle of a big moment, but I suppose in a sense it's reminiscent of when we used to have to wait week to week for episodes to come out. But regardless, the pacing this season has been interesting. I'm not implying it's been good or bad. I'm just surprised because I find in some ways it's taken me by surprise positively, where for example, this very moment that we are here already, this is kind of a thing I would have expected to have happen at the very end of this season, but it's happening in the middle. So that's really exciting and surprising. But at the same time, there have been some other things I've wanted to see, or there have been some things I've wanted to take time with that we haven't basically touched on whatsoever. And in that sense, I'm frustrated, or at the very least, am in suspense, because I'm wondering if we're going to get those things. I'm sad we haven't gotten them yet. If we don't end up getting them, I think I'm going to be a little bit bummed. So one example I wrote is that we're really building up Ozai. We've been building up Ozai since season 1. And at the end of season 2, when Zuko makes the decision that he does, I was expecting that a lot of season 3, we would see so much more of Ozai. And we've pretty much not seen him. I'm hoping we see him a little bit more. I was, really hoping to see more dynamics between him and Zuko, because really we get the flashback episode, The Storm, and you barely get him at all there. And you have hints of him through Zuko's trauma, but otherwise you really don't know him much. And he is, in a sense, like the surface level big bad of the whole show. I say surface level because I definitely think so much of this show is more so about inner turmoil, strife, the way in which trauma can impact us, the burdens that have been placed on us as a result of the world and the way in which we fit in society. You know, you see these things with Zuko and Aang very well. But then, of course, I think Ozai is just a single figure in a long line of those. And I think that this is touched on really well in episode 6, the Avatar and the Fire Lord, where you're seeing he's just one individual in this long line of people and this entire society and nation that has been committing atrocities in the name of progress, not really, but I think that in actuality there's a lot of commentary, and we've seen time and time again episodes where we're looking at the effects of conquering. So I think in a sense are these more abstract things that are actually the true antagonists, you could say. But I do think that Ozai is a character I have wanted to actually see a little bit more of, and we haven't, and that is a little bit disappointing to me at this point. I'm hoping still that maybe we'll get more. I'm especially hoping we'll get to see more of Azula and Ozai, because we kind of can gather Zuko's relationship with his father due to all of the things we know about Zuko and how he's been explored. But we really hardly have seen even Azula, of course, let alone Ozai, but I really want to see how those two interact, and more of how she thinks of her father, maybe not blatantly, because last week I went into a really long discussion about how I'm not really the biggest fan of when things are really blatant. I like a little bit more nuance. Sorry if you hear a plane. But I do want to see a little more. But anyway, that was a lot of general thoughts. Getting more into specifics now. I don't have a ton of thoughts about the Avatar and the Fire Lord. I do like the way in which both Zuko and Aang, we've kind of seen them on these parallel paths, and then you actually see that it's almost like history repeating itself, except for they have the opportunity to break the cycle. And I actually wrote, and I'm sure I slightly misworded this here, but in another life, do you think we would have been friends? That quote that we got from the episode with Aang in season 1, when we have the Blue Spirit episode. And I kind of feel like that quote in and of itself was foreshadowing to this moment, but you could almost say it was like it's almost like foreshadowing to the past, which I think is a stupid way to word it. But just this idea of there's always been a chance, and there's always been hope that there can be something better, but thus far, these individuals have always made the wrong decisions. And so is Zuko going to break from that? And is Aang going to be able to fulfill his role as Avatar and right the wrongs of the past, you could say? It is an informative episode. It definitely has a lot for the lore for us to mull over and think about, but I don't know that I had too many thoughts otherwise. It was pretty cool to get to see what the Avatar could be capable of. Luna bear. Sometimes she really scratches at her ear and then she hurts herself, and if you heard her grumbling, okay, bear, now she's flapping. So anyway, I have to reorient myself here. We've seen glimpses of what avatars can do, because you see Kyoshi, the way they sliced the land in half and then created this separate island. So we've had glimpses, but it was pretty cool to get to see the Avatar get to go all out. I liked that. Moving on, though, to episode 7, The Runaway. This episode was a little bit what I had mentioned last week, being a thing I didn't really want to have happen, where I do feel like the episode where Katara is the painted lady is pretty similar to the episode we got in season 1, where I think it's called Imprisoned. It felt very similar. It felt, even in the pacing, its beats, that it was pretty similar. In its dialogue, it felt similar. So I was hoping we wouldn't get any additional episodes that felt too similar to previous ones, just because I really think there's so much to have happen here, and there's so many characters I still want to dissect that I don't know that I want to necessarily revisit almost same storylines or same things. It's not that similar things can't still occur, I just don't necessarily want entire episodes dedicated to it. So I did feel like this episode reminded me of The Chase a bit from season 2, because that's when you see Katara and Toph butt heads, and the butting heads is an example of that can still happen. I just don't know that so much of the episode it needs to be a focus, but you see them butting heads similar to how they did in The Chase. You see them being kind of at each other's throats. They're being unkind to one another. And I did feel like it also kind of spelled some things out for us. I've noted throughout that I feel like Katara often is the one that rallies everybody, that she's kind of the parent of the group. And this episode's like, hey, I don't know if you've noticed, but Katara's the mom of the group. And I was a little frustrated by that, because I'm like, I know. Let us come to that conclusion ourselves. You don't need to tell us your character types and the tendencies they have. Wasn't my favorite. I should clarify, I'm not saying the show never does anything clever or innovative or anything like that. I just mean this particular instance of them being like, Katara's the mom of the group. You're such a mom. It was just very on the nose. Obviously, it's being used in a way as an insult towards Katara, and an accurate insult. So I understand it being sort of a realistic thing, but I do feel like the show has handled these sorts of things in more subtle ways previously, and so some of this more on-the-nose delivery of defining our characters is not my favorite, and it has happened a couple times this season, so I didn't love that. But I want to highlight a thing I did really like, which is that I'm really happy to see Toph reflecting on her decision to leave her family, because Toph has a very complicated family dynamic, and it's hurtful, but she loves her family and they love her. It doesn't mean that just because you love somebody that you can't cause them harm. I feel like you very much see that with her. You've seen it since we met this character. And I can only imagine how difficult it is for her to be on the road with what are essentially strangers, taking on pretty much the most intense stakes, and she's doing it pretty much on her own. I mean, when I say on her own, I mean, while she obviously has Aang and gang, she doesn't know them very well, and so she's kind of taking it upon herself as a child, when she's previously been kept away from the world, to do all of this. And I think she's really admirable, and I think she's a very strong character, both, literally with her strength, with her magical prowess, and then also just emotionally. But there is that vulnerability there. At the end of the day, it's there for everybody. And so I'm glad that we see her reflect and wonder about her family, missing her family, wondering if they're worried. A big pet peeve of mine in stories is when characters never look back, because so much of who we are is defined by what has transpired in our lives, the people that we've had in our lives, how they had an impact on us, the events that have sort of shaped our view of things. And, we've obviously we've seen that so much with Zuko, and they've done such a phenomenal job with that. So I'm glad that Toph had this moment, and that she could look back and she could kind of wonder, I hope my parents aren't worried about me. What do my parents think? And I liked that they kind of came to the conclusion of, well, we're here, but also why don't we sit down and maybe see about, well, she comes to the conclusion herself that she wants to try and reach out to them, and the rest of them are supportive of her in that. So I really appreciated that. I thought that was very sweet. So while I didn't love aspects of this episode, by no means do I think it was a bad episode. I think this is a very important looking back moment for Toph, and it just really highlights the stakes for each individual character of what they are taking part in. Next, we have the Puppet Master. This episode, one of my favorites. I don't know if other people hate this episode, but one of my favorites because it starts in a way where you're like, so what are we doing here? And then it gets quite dark. And it's, I think, I say one-off, meaning it doesn't really pertain too much, currently anyway, to main plot things. I imagine, obviously, the blood bending is going to play a bigger role, but it was unexpected. I think this is the darkest plot line we've gotten since Ba Sing Se, because obviously the whole brainwashing, basically, of people, manipulating people, making them live in fear, that was extremely dark, but it was dark in a broad sense, whereas this is really dark specifically. And even just the way in which she used bloodbending, the darkness of it, the threat of it, the fact that she was going to have Aang and Sokka hurt each other using bloodbending, and she was willing to do all of that because of what had been done to her in the past. And there was a weird, even though she's committing these horrible acts, and that I don't think is debatable. I don't think most people would agree that having innocent people imprisoned underground is not a great thing to do. But even though she's committing all these horrible acts and instilling fear in these people, there is still this sense of, when she's taken at the end, I wrote, her being locked up again is kind of sad, because the reason that she was so broken is because of this horrible imprisonment that she had endured, and now she's probably going to live out the rest of her life in horrible imprisonment. So she's right back. And I just feel like this was a hard-hitting episode. And the way in which it shows like cycles of violence and hatred, of course she wouldn't come out of that situation being the most peaceful person. It makes sense that there'd be a lot that she'd have to work through. It's just really sad how it all turned out. It's one of those kind of cautionary tales of, I think with Katara in particular, we see so much in her of wanting to fight the good fight, wanting to stand up for people. And in a sense, I feel like this woman represents the dark side of what Katara could be. And it's interesting because we've had multiple instances of Katara gravitating toward people who do show us the dark side of things. I think Jet, in a sense, She did push away from Jet because she's like, okay, well, you're framing innocent people and you're willing to let innocent people die. So I don't think that I stand with that. But she still kind of gravitated toward that person that, again, wants to fight the good fight. And then this woman leads her to have an opportunity of learning more about how to utilize her bending. And she sort of represents a lot of the harm that's been inflicted on the Water Tribe. And obviously, Katara has lost her mother as a result of what the Fire Nation has done to the Water Tribe. So I feel like this is a path Katara could go on if she paves the way with good intentions, but then eventually steers in the wrong direction. I feel like that's part of why she's so disgusted by the idea of bloodbending, why she's so devastated at the end of this. And because I don't think she wants to, ultimately she doesn't want to hurt people. I think she's seen that this woman is not herself, really, at the end of the day. She's kind of a product of the harm that's been caused her. I just thought it was a great episode. I really liked this one. Nightmares and Daydreams, very drastically different from that episode, and kind of a necessary episode 1 in that it has a nice tone difference from the episode previously, but also I think is a great look into Aang's anxiety over what's to come. And it's done in a very Aang fashion, which I really liked. I really enjoyed this episode. While it might maybe feel to some people like, okay, can we just get on with it? I don't know. Maybe that's how you felt, or maybe you didn't feel that way at all. I think that taking a moment to really reflect on just how much is at stake and just how much is personally at stake for Aang and how much everybody's relying on him to save the world, of course it would manifest in these ways. Of course he would lose sleep. Of course he would feel like he has to prepare, and everybody's telling him to rest, but how can you rest when your mind is restless? So I thought it was a very realistic thing to have occur. So I will say, I wrote down this quote because it made me laugh out loud, but I forgot my pants and my math test when because he has all these goofy dreams, and at some point, I think while he's awake, he says this, and it doesn't obviously make any sense in the context of what's happening, but I feel bad saying, oh, I enjoyed this, because it's kind of sad for Aang, but what a fun, quirky, zany, but poignant way to display Aang's anxiety. I thought it was great. Oh, I did write, though. Well, first off, I put Dragon Ball, because I'm pretty sure there are references in his dreams, and I just don't know maybe all the specifics, or I recognize them, but I didn't watch those shows before, so Appa has an outfit. Obviously, Aang comes in multiple times with different things with his dreams, so I liked these silly little references. I don't really know why they're there, and I don't want to look it up, because I don't want to be spoiled for anything, but I liked those. I thought they were very funny. But anyway, I was going to say, I wrote in my notes, pampered Prince Zuko annoys me. Zuko currently is so obnoxious. I also wrote, is he dreaming? I guess not. When he's with May, I don't know. I just don't love that. But the Zuko plot line in this episode irritated me a little bit. I'm not saying that the episode was written poorly, but I just mean like internally I'm like, oh, come on, because when there's the war meeting happening, I'm like, let's go. I want to see what happens in the war meeting. And then you just don't see it, and I was like, what? So I'm hoping there's a reason we don't see it. And I have guesses as to why maybe we didn't see it, but I don't know. I feel like there's an important reason that we didn't see. Part of me is like, do they know about the Day of the Black Sun? And they know for the potential invasion, and that's why we don't see it, because it would make sense that they don't show that, because then when Aang and them show up, if it turns out, end up having Fire Nation forces ready for them, then we're watching thinking, wait a second, but they knew, and then you maybe get a glimpse of what actually happened during that meeting, and then you'll be like, oh gosh darn it, they did know, they were planning this. But if they showed that too early, then they reveal their hand. Maybe it has something to do with that. But I don't know. I wrote in my notes, why don't they show the war meeting? Because I just really wanted that. And then also, last thing I'll say about that episode is when Appa starts talking. I know obviously he's not literally talking, but when Aang sees him talking, I really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed the voice they gave him. Anyway, So, Day of the Black Sun, I'm aware of this, but I'm like, no, Aang can't access the avatars thing. It's just like, what are they gonna do? It's just a dumb thing I wrote down. It doesn't actually really mean anything, but I'm just like, what's gonna happen? And I was excited. And I wrote, yay, Haru, because I actually did like this character from the Earth episode. And then I really liked Appa's armor. I thought that was great, and I'm glad we're protecting Appa, because he's been shot at a lot. And he's had a lot. He's been through a lot. Our bud's been through too much. I wrote confident Aang smooch. Are we gonna talk about this after? I feel like not you and me, like all of us. I just mean, are the characters gonna address that later? And then I wrote giant caterpillar vessels are awesome. I genuinely feel like all the inventions that we're seeing on display, the way so much of what we've had previously all kind of coming together for this big fight is really, really cool. The animation has been interesting. I think we saw some of this previously, but I feel like we're getting a decent amount of this different kind of animation in this season, and you see it a lot with the machinery. But anyway, I now am just waiting to see what's going to happen with what comes next. So, sorry if you were hoping that I would combine. I don't really know exactly where technically, because I've heard there's like 20 or 21 episodes this season. And I think in order for me to actually get all of them, that I'd have to stop it here if I'm going to continue doing these batch episodes in 5 episode chunks. This is like the drill, though, in the way it's broken apart. So anyway, I'm curious your thoughts on this batch of episodes. I feel like on one hand, it felt like we weren't moving, and then all of a sudden it's go time, and it's the Day of the Black Sun. So I have no idea where we're going to go for the next chunk of this season. I'm hoping it's going to just go from here, and that we're going to just get heavy hit after heavy hit with the rest of the season. And I'm hoping Zuko's finally going to stop. I need so much more of Iroh, because we've gotten basically nothing of Iroh. We've gotten an occasional thing here and there. But I really want to see more. Obviously, we saw that little white lotus piece earlier when Sokka was meeting his sword master. So I'm thinking there's got to be things going on behind the scenes with Iroh, and I want to know what's going on with Iroh. I mostly just want more of him in general. I want Zuko to stop being obnoxious. I want to know what happened in the War Council meeting. So there's a lot of question marks currently, and I'm just waiting for when those things are answered. But anyway, as always, feel free to let me know your thoughts, and I am really excited looking forward, but I'm also really nervous. So, but thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.